Now, I first came to Indonesia in April of 1988, and just last week completed my 38th anniversary here. I hadn't planned to stay quite this long. I had been all around Asia. I'd been to Malaysia on business, even Singapore, Thailand several times, Philippines very often, but never to Indonesia. So Sonny Carlson, God bless him, who was dying of dementia in Vancouver, brought on mostly by alcohol, hired me in Chicago at an ESL convention. And he hired me in part because I had once been of use to him. In Vancouver, he was, in the 70s, he was about to travel to Asia and asked for a recommendation on an SLR. And I told him what I knew about cameras, which is not very much, but he remembered that. And that in part led to his hiring me for American language training, almarhum, on Jalan Gajah Mada 123, and it was a great time. And we mostly had government contracts with organizations like the family planning and the police and the technology, BPPT. And one of the contracts was with the banks. And we had a contract with Bank Negara Indonesia, BNI 46, one of the very first banks ever to form after the war. And my students were mostly executives, some secretaries, and I suspect that they were being allowed to use company time to study English as a kind of bonus, a kind of gift from the company. And it was fun, and I have already made one video about Fifi, one of my students, very shy girl, who said that she liked to cry, and I had asked her what her hobby was, and she says, I like to cry. And I thought, well, that's very efficient, cheap, easy to use hobby without any accessories or equipment. And one day in class, the usual class, I had about 11 or 12, 4 or 5 executives in their 50s, their 40s, their 50s, and a few people in the international division. And we were talking about pop music. And one of the students said, yeah, I like that. That's really big in nigger music, isn't it? And I scanned the room, and there was no reaction. Now, at this point, I should say, in the West, there would immediately be chastisement and shame and horror and, a great put down. But you don't do that with paying students, especially when they're executives or they have face to save, which is an aspect of life in Asia. So I looked around to see if there was any reaction from any of the students, and there was none. And choosing my words extremely carefully, I said, well, we don't really use that word in English, in conversation, any longer. He said, what, nigger? And I said, yes. Well, he said, I've heard it time and again in their music. Nigger this and nigger that. They use it. I couldn't argue against that. Again, choosing my words cautiously, I said, well, that is the case, that's true. They use a lot of profanity also, which you don't hear in, Pete Seeger or, Roy James. You don't hear that in popular music much, but I say that particular word is only used in that context. Now the students They were starting to get interested because they could see I was squirming and I was dancing around the issue, and it was puzzling because they had no idea. They had no idea about, well, they had some idea of the American race problem, quote unquote, but they didn't really appreciate the nature of the culture war, which is ongoing, and which is liable to escalate into a civil war from all I read and hear. I haven't been back to the USA since 2019, so I don't really know what's going on at the moment. There's a video on YouTube, this World War II British movie, a British, what is it? It's a war movie, but it's not about war. It's about life on the English bases and in the English war machine, the military, in which there is a canine whose name was nigger. And so you hear that word over and over and over again. They excerpt these clips for the video on YouTube. And it's said very innocently. I trust the people involved are notorious racists, like as we all are. In Asia, certainly they are. Powerful anti-Chinese racism, which in Indonesia, I must admit, has really, really gone down. The Indonesians now really admire the Chinese. They have shifted their trust and acceptance to the People's Republic of China and away from Western countries, because Western countries are duplicitous and still imperialistic. America is extremely imperialistic. The Europeans not so much, but they're carrying a bad load, bad rep. So what did I do? I eventually managed to steer the conversation away from that topic, but I think I made the point, because in Indonesian also there are many expressions that are not really safe to use. Not safe. I mean, you can get in trouble here very easily for making an anti-Islamic or anti-Catholic or anti-Pribumi or even anti-Batak, anti-Makassar. Any expression like that is considered to be Sara, S-A-R-A, which is language or acts intended to arouse racial, cultural, or religious conflict. My lower plate's bouncing around. No, they're both bouncing around. Can you hear it snap? It's hell to be old.